So recently, I bought an entire 8-piece drum kit for about $100, and it fits in this bag. Now, of course, any drum set that costs so little and fits in so small a container must not be worth very much, right? Well, this kit comes from Arbiter, and it's the Flats drum kit. Arbiter drums are the brainchild of Ivor Arbiter, and this guy has quite a history in the English music and instrument world. He's credited with designing the iconic Beatles logo on the front of the bass drum with the drop-down T. He was involved with the creation of Heyman drums for people who are fans of that particular series. And he had been working on sort of one-touch, easy tuning systems for a while, including something called the Auto-Tune, which looked nothing like this. This is kind of the one-touch tuning system, which allegedly was inspired by seeing how exhaust system parts were clamped together using these rings, similar to something that I have on the Peterbilt that I drive for work. If you could clamp two round pipe parts together using this ring and clamp system, why couldn't you use that to tension a drum head down on a drum, and to get that to distribute that tension evenly all in one shot? And of course, before these came around, we did see full-shelled acoustic Arbiter drums that had this kind of one-touch tuning ring and clamp system, both top and bottom, which gave them a very clean but odd look. And drummers, being kind of the conservative and visual critters that we are, maybe we're not quick to embrace that sort of thing. In any event, this is a very unique little set of drums, so let's take a closer look at it. Now, the drums that came with this kit included 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, and 16-inch toms, a 22-inch bass drum, and there's also a 14-inch snare drum that I'm not using for the demonstration because, frankly, it's not all that great. So instead, I've chosen to substitute my Pacific Mudflap Girl snare drum, which always sounds fine. And speaking of sound, critical to the sound of this kit is head selection. And these things really play well with Remo pinstripes, especially if you've got a deader sounding version of them. Like, I've got some old ebony pinstripes that I put on some of these tom-toms that immediately improved their sound 100%, versus like a single ply head or maybe a pinstripe that wasn't in such great shape. And part of the mojo in getting these things to tune up right is making sure that the ring is properly seated all the way around. Sometimes it can get a little hung up on one side or the other, and the tuning will end up sounding horrible. But I've tried these with the pinstripes on them, except for this Power Stroke that I have on the 16. I have to go out and buy another pinstripe for that one, and maybe I'll do a quick update on that if necessary. But even with the Power Stroke, it sounds acceptable. And the bass drum has a Power Stroke 3 as well. And the unique thing about that is that the head is not struck on the usual top side of the head. It's actually struck from behind. And I was a little confused when I bought the kit because I saw that the Flam Slam batter patch that's on the bass drum head was on the underside of the head, and I thought, well, that's unusual, until I saw how everything was mounted together. Also, part of this kit was in pieces and parts, like half the drums were disassembled and didn't have heads on them at all. The rings and the hoops and everything were kind of scattered around and about. And they do have a bit of shell, about 1 inch of wooden shell in each one of these things to serve as the bearing edge. And one of those was completely out of the frame. And that's actually good because that gave me an eye into how these things are actually assembled. And that has implications for a future project involving that snare drum if I'm feeling so bold. I'm also not really a fan of the mounts that are on these things. They're kind of like a Gibraltar style, original DW style mount, but they really play best with a 10.5mm / 3/8 mounting post versus the 1/2 inch DW mounts that I have on here, on which they barely fit. So ideally I should mount these on the same hardware that I use for my Pacific drums, which I'm going to be having plenty of that stuff around given some future builds that I've got coming up. Now, is this the kind of kit that I want to keep? Yes. Mostly because of its oddball factor, but also it is nice to have something that sounds decent, doesn't take up a lot of room, and as far as hauling them around in that case, I'm probably not inclined to do that, just because I think it's more work to put them in the case than it is to just nest them together in groups of 2 and 3 and just put them in the back seat of the car, or in some cases the passenger seat of the car. I mean, they really don't take up a lot of room no matter where you put them. In fact, one of the reasons I bought the kit, besides the incredibly low price, was the fact that I'm trying to limit the number of drum kits that I bring in here because I don't necessarily have the room. For these, I've got room anywhere. I can put these under the bed if I wanted to. I also might want to experiment later with this kit. One, with seeing if I can replace the original shells that came with these things, if there's a way to modify them in some meaningful way that allows either for more shell or perhaps a better quality, if that would make any difference on a drum this shallow. I mean, there's more metal than wood. It's like the Darth Vader of drums. It's more machine than organic. These seem like they'd be a good subject for mounting electronic drum triggers to, and seeing if they would double as trigger pads in some way, especially given that they can fit just about anywhere in a drum kit. I mean, I've actually got the 14-inch floor tom here underneath the 13-inch rack tom because the shells, there's just no shell there to interfere with each other. So I feel like a lot of fun can be had with these drums, and as I start to explore those things, of course I'll make videos about it, because why not? So anyway, that's a look at a very unique and unusual kit, and it's questionable whether they're worth any more than the $100 I paid for them on the open market. A kit like this must be of questionable demand anywhere it goes. And maybe I'm the sucker for having these things at all, but I don't feel like a sucker. So I got an 8-piece drum kit for next to nothing, and they sound pretty decent under the right conditions. So anyway, that's the Arbiter Flats kit. I'm Mike Lindsay. Thanks for coming out.